Okay, here comes Charlie, and we are streaming on foxbusiness.com. We're also taping, and we'll air a bunch of this later. Hello, Charlie.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. Well, let me get the Dave Sokol stuff out of the way here from you. Warren talked a lot about it this weekend. I'll just get your first reaction about it, knowing Dave Sokol and all that happened, and how people are talking so much about how it dinged the reputation of Berkshire. Your thoughts?
I saw it instantly as tragedy. Super talented person. Flaw. World hurts him. That flaw line. A very old plot. This is a tragedy we've seen since the days of the Greeks. It just happens all the time.
Was it greed? Stupidity?
Well, certainly it was an error.
Liz, let me mention one point I mentioned in the annual meeting. Charlie and Bill and I had seen Dave Sokol 8 or 9 years ago when presented with a huge incentive contract based on some really tough goals that was to include him and his number 2 man. I showed him a piece of paper describing this arrangement. It involved $75 million of some incredible goals were met. I had proposed that it be $50 million to him and $25 million to his number 2 man. He looked at the proposal. He says, "This is extremely generous." He says, "I just have one change I'd like to make. It should be 37.5 to me and 37.5 to the other fellow." So he took $12.5 million and moved it from his pocket potentially into the other fellow's pocket. Now that is not somebody that is consumed by greed, and it's somebody that I would certainly have a lot of trust in.
But 10 years later, it is what it is. And of course, Warren wrote the now infamous press release.
Did I write that?
Fortunately, yes.
Oh, okay.
Did you check it? Did you edit it?
Well, it was written one way, and then after talking to Dave, he changed it, and it ended up imperfect. And of course I approved it. If Warren does something dumb, I'm not going to catch it, by and large. My brain works a lot the way his does.
What needs to be changed at Berkshire, if anything?
Very little.
Okay, very little. Let's get to, you brought up Greece and the times of Greece. On a different level, this weekend, both of you expressed real concern about the sovereign debt in Greece, which a lot of people think is an old story now.
Well,
is it?
Yeah. Sort of an old, it may have been kind of an old story, the way the housing bubble was kind of an old story in 2005 or 6. I mean, we are not better off than a year ago in terms of the European sovereign debt situation. The Greek bonds are now yielding over 20%. That's a lot higher than they were a year ago.
That indicates worry.
Yeah, the problem of what you do with 17 countries tied to a common monetary unit and incapable of issuing their own debt in their own currency, and simultaneously following vastly different fiscal policies and having different attitudes among their people about government, that we don't know the answer to that one yet.
Charlie, you specifically said some things about the Greeks. You said they don't want to work and they don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah. Well, right. he's in charge of diplomacy at Berkshire. You have to understand that.
It's just so extreme, the Greeks. And they got a nice, undrenched country. I can understand their attitude. But whether the rest of Europe wants to allow countries that really don't want to work and don't want to suffer and don't want to pay taxes to be in the monetary union with them, so that in effect that country has a credit card on which you can draw on the others. Look, when we tried something similar in the United States before we had our Constitution, the colonies issued a lot of worthless debt. I think the European Union has grossly underestimated the problem they have.
Does it survive? Does the euro survive, Charlie?
Well, I suspect the euro will survive, but there may be fewer members that issue it.
You think Greece gets kicked out?
Who knows?
No, it's an enormously important problem, and part of the reason it's so important is because we can't figure out the answers.
All right, but you both said that the most the greater chunk of investment that Berkshire will make in the future when it comes to buying companies will probably be here in the United States. Why is that?
Well, that's the place that has the most companies that want to join Berkshire.
And we need sizable acquisitions, and America's still all by itself in terms of size, and more people are familiar with us still here, and in some countries there's much more of a tradition of keeping them in the family forever. We hope we get calls from around the world, and we will get some calls from around the world. We'll get more calls from the U.S.
We were talking earlier before you joined us about taxes here in the United States. Should we, with this gigantic deficit we have, should we have extended the Bush tax cuts, Charlie?
No. I would argue that we could stand a little higher taxes on people like me.
And me.
Yeah, you too.
Bill?
Absolutely.
Bill's a little
I'll
quiet
pay
there.
if you pay.
No, I pay more taxes than anyone, so I'm glad to pay more.
The interesting example here is Rome during one of the Punic Wars. The Roman public paid off more than half the war debt before the war was over. That's my kind of a country.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. Yes, and when they started just printing the money and shaving the coins, why, they just slowly went to hell.
But Bill, if higher taxes on the wealthy even, or perhaps more others included, are an inevitability, does that hurt philanthropy? You and Warren have pushed billionaires all around the world to commit, in your giving pledge, half of their wealth after they die to philanthropy. If you tax the wealthy at a higher rate, do you think that they'll then stop giving to philanthropy?
No, I really don't. I think there's going to continue to be people who are very successful and have large fortunes. And the question will be, do they want to get involved in giving that money back or perhaps starting a dynasty? You know, there aren't that many choices. And Warren and I have both had a chance to meet people who have amazing passion about giving their money away in the right way. And they don't talk a lot about the tax system when they're talking about their commitments.
We have 69 people or couples that have signed up to the Giving Pledge, and it isn't just at their death. I mean, during the lifetime with most of these people. I think the subject of taxes that just doesn't come up. I mean, these people would not change their behavior if the tax rate were either higher or lower, in my opinion.
Who was the toughest sell? Which billionaire was the toughest nut to crack?
See if any of them is stupid enough to answer that question.
Well, was it Charlie? Has Charlie done it?
We don't talk about any names. We don't talk about who turned us down or anything of the sort.
What's the #1 pitch to get people to do it?
Well, it's just explaining it. I mean, but I think that it is helped by the fact that we do ask people to write these letters explaining why they're doing it, and we post those on the internet, and I think that some of them may prove persuasive, not only to some people now, but 10 years from now or 20 years from now.